So, what are music charts these days anyway? Once upon a time, in the pre-streaming days, an artist would release an album. It would come out on vinyl, cassette, CD. People would buy a copy, take it home, and that would be it. That registers as a sale, right? But these days with streaming, it's far, far, far more complicated. How are album sales calculated these days? How do organisations such as ARIA, the Australian Recording Industry Association, or Billboard make their charts, particularly album charts these days, when they can't simply count physical copies that are bought? Well, first of all, there are things called TEAs, or track equivalent albums. This is about downloading tracks as opposed to streaming them. TEA is calculated by adding up all of the song sales from an album and dividing it by 10. Thus, 10 song downloads from the same album is equivalent to one album unit, regardless of which tracks are downloaded. It could be the same track 10 times, as far as I can see. That would still be regarded as one album unit. Also, even if there are 20 tracks on an album, only 10 downloads have to occur for that to be registered as one album unit. If there are 20 tracks and each is downloaded just once, this would be equivalent to 2 album units. I'm not sure whether that's entirely fair. An alternative might be to use something like the average number of downloads per track. So in that case, 10 downloads from a 10-track album would constitute one album unit, but it would require 20 downloads of tracks to constitute a single album unit of a 20-track album. Is this fair or not? I'm honestly not sure. It might encourage shorter albums. Which approach do you think would be the most fair? Second are the SEAs, the streaming equivalent albums. SEA is calculated by adding up all of the audio song streams from an album. Premium streaming totals, so that's where you're paying for the streaming service, are divided by 1,250. I'm not sure how they arrived at that figure. And free streaming totals are divided by 3,750. So free streams are regarded as less valuable than paid streams, which kind of makes sense if we're regarding sales. Thus, 1,250 premium streams or 3,750 free streams from the same album is equivalent to one album unit. Note again that this could all come from streams of a single track, or at least be very heavily biased towards particular tracks. Now Billboard, and I'm assuming the other charts around the world too, Billboard apparently combines both of these plus physical sales to arrive at a chart position. Note that sales of singles prior to the release of the album are not counted towards the album sales, and only sales after the album is released are counted towards album sales. A few things are clear from this. First, calculating album sales is bloody complicated these days, and it's certainly complicated by the fact that it might indicate a large number of downloads of only a few tracks off an album for it to be counted as an album sale. Second, it seems to me that comparisons of sales pre and post streaming are iffy at best. This is partly because the equivalents used may not actually be equivalent. I'm not sure how they arrived at the figures that they did arrive at. There may be several other ways of doing this, and this may or may not be the best. I also think these comparisons are iffy for another reason, and this is my third takeaway from this. I think charts pre and post streaming actually measure and are meaning different things. Physical album sales then and now are not an indication of how much the music is actually being listened to. I may have bought an album prior to streaming, listened to it a couple of times, then shelved it. Never listened to it again. Or, alternatively, I might have bought an album and listened to it 10 times a day, every day, for a year. Neither of these affects its position on the chart. It only measures sales, not how much the music is actually being listened to. I suspect that many people these days buy vinyl albums as collectibles rather than to listen to them. They probably still listen to the music via streaming. Streams, on the other hand, but not downloads, measure exactly how often a track is listened to, or at least the first 30 seconds or so, I think. So this is a much more accurate representation of what music is actually being listened to at any point in time, as opposed to just sales. The final point is this, though it's not exactly related to chart position per se. When an artist could only release a physical copy, they certainly received more money by way of royalties up front. But, by and large, that was it for that album. Streaming, although it offers a smaller return per stream, it clearly has the potential to offer an ongoing income. Often when an artist releases a new album, there's also a brief resurgence in the popularity of their earlier material. In the pre-streaming era, this would just mean that I take down the earlier album from the shelf and start playing it again. This does nothing at all to increase its sales or its position on the charts. But when I begin streaming the earlier material, this immediately has an impact on its sales and chart position. I think all of this suggests that some of the comparisons that are made are not particularly helpful. For instance, I don't think that having a number one album today can be easily compared to having a number one album in the pre-streaming world. So statements such as this album has broken the record for the number of weeks at number one probably don't mean very much.